Hello everybody, it's Christina and welcome back to my library. This is my September reading wrap up. Now, I wasn't actually actively doing booktube for the majority of September, but I was actively reading for the majority of September. In fact, I had a really good reading month in September. I read 8 books, which is a ton for me. I usually do like 4. So this was awesome. I read a lot of really good books too, actually. I think most of them, with the exception of a couple, got 4 or 5 stars. So pretty happy about this month. So I was thinking I would go over what I read and give you my thoughts on the books that I did read. I only have the physical copy of one book. I tend to get a lot of books from my library if I don't already have them in my collection. So the majority of these are library books or they're on my Kindle, but I'll make sure to put like a picture of the book up here somewhere. So let's get started on this. The first book that I want to talk about is the very first book that I finished this month, and it was one that I read on my Kindle. I do own it. It's on my Kindle. And that is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This book was amazing. It was like you're following the story of the living embodiments of the boroughs of New York City. And they were so amazing. They felt like real people. And I honestly, anything that N.K. Jemisin writes, I'm going to probably love. I don't think there's a single book of hers that I haven't given less than 4 stars to. I read the entire Broken Earth trilogy, and now I've read The City We Became. I still need to read Inheritance. I own it. It's actually on my Kindle as well, but I haven't gotten a chance to do that yet. So I'm going to be looking into doing that at some point too. But there was a lot of like Lovecraftian elements to it as well. I've not actually read Lovecraft. I don't actually want to, but I kind of liked the references to that, and this book was really, really good. The villain was good. The boroughs I thought were well written. As somebody that grew up in New Jersey, I lived very close to New York City and we used to go a lot. So I felt like I was fairly familiar with the boroughs, and like the embodiments of them felt very familiar. They felt real. It was just such a well done book. I don't know that it's going to be a series that takes place only in New York. I would really like to see her write another city. I'd be very curious to see what she does next. But yeah, it was like a 4.5 out of 5 stars for me. It was very, very good, and I loved it a lot. The next book is actually the only one that I have a physical copy of at the moment. I do own this, and this is The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. Stuart Turton is probably one of my favorite mystery writers. He's got 2 books out so far. It's this one, and you probably can't see it because it's up on the top shelf there, but it's also The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I read the Evelyn Hardcastle book maybe 2 years ago, and it got me out of a really bad reading slump. So honestly, anything that Stuart Turton writes, I'm going to try and read. This one, I would say it was good. It was not as good as Evelyn Hardcastle, though. But I have to say, though, like, I really enjoyed this. It was another quick read. It was another mystery with some like fantasy elements to it. And this one actually takes place on a ship, and it's set in like the 1600s, and the ship is going from some island and it has to go back to Amsterdam. Can't remember if it was Amsterdam, but it's like basically traveling. It's like a spice trading ship, and it's like a whole flotilla of them. And like all these mysterious things start happening, people start dying, and like you're trying to figure out what exactly is causing it. Is it a supernatural thing? Is it an actual person? Is it, it's a ship, it's gotta be somebody on board. So, it was really good. This one was 4 out of 5 stars for me. I had a couple of like issues with the pacing, and I really liked the characters in this as well. Arendt is the main character, along with Sarah, who is the wife of the man that's basically in charge of the ship, or in charge of, well, he's not in charge of the entire ship, but he's basically in charge of the nobles on the ship. And he's the reason that they're traveling. And yeah, it's very good. And it's also very creepy because it's on this ship, and like, that there's no way for them to escape. It was good. I really liked it. I can't wait to see what Stuart Turton does next. This was a good one as well. If you haven't read any of his books, highly recommend both of them. They're both mysteries, but they're both Mysteries that are very, I don't know, they're very different from mysteries that I've read before because they do have some like fantasy magical elements to them, and I thought that that really added a little bit of something to it because I also really like that kind of book as well. So the rest of these books I don't have physical copies of. I will be posting them up here. The next book that I read is a library book. I've already returned it, and it is The Wives by Taryn Fisher. This one was I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. I will say that it was a very fast read. I think I read it in like a day and a half, but I found it to be pretty lackluster, and there was a twist at the end that I didn't think was really much of a twist. I didn't like any of the characters. I'm not sure I was supposed to like any of the characters, but I definitely didn't like any of the characters. And, you know, it was fine. It was, like I said, the reason it's more highly rated than I guess it could have been is that it was a fast read. I did read it very quickly, but I found that I wasn't super interested in any of it. But the plot of this one is you're following the life of one wife of a man that has multiple wives, and you're kind of like going through her story, and she kind of feels like one of the wives might be getting abused by the husband, so then she starts to like look into it, and the whole like story was that they're not supposed to ever come in contact with each other, the wives I mean, but she starts to break that, and she starts to try and meet them and get to know them, and it just is a story about, you know, what's happening to the one wife. Why does she have bruises on her? And then why does the guy act completely different to the wife that you're following? It's interesting, but it wasn't anything I, you know, would write home about. Next up is Still Life by Louise Penny, and this is another mystery. I was very much in the mood for mysteries in September, if you couldn't tell. However, I didn't like this one. The setting, though, was absolutely gorgeous. It takes place in a very small town in Quebec, Canada, and it's right around Thanksgiving, and there was a murder, and you're trying to figure out like what happened to the person that was murdered. The way that the author describes this town, it just sounds like a place I would really like to visit in the fall, and like we're back in fall right now, and it was just very atmospheric. I loved the setting of this book so much, and I wish I loved the story as much as I love the setting, because the story was so boring. I didn't think I could ever be so bored reading a murder mystery, but I was bored, and I knew who had done it early on, so I was getting frustrated. But the setting was really nice, and that's why I didn't give it a 1 star. But the mystery was just, it was not that great. I hear that there's a whole series around the detective that is like one of the main characters in this book, and I really do want to give this series another try. I know Louise Penny is great with her mysteries and her settings, and it's kind of got like those cozy mystery vibes, which I really do like to read. This one just didn't do it for me, and maybe it's because it's the very first one in the series. I don't know. I'm going to give it another shot. I know that my library, I'm pretty sure, has all of the books in this series, so I'm going to try and get another one and see if maybe I like that one better. I don't know. Again, the setting was fantastic, and I really wish I could visit this little town that is being discussed in the book, you know, without a murder happening, but it was just so picturesque, and like you could see it on a Thomas Kincaid poster or something. It was so pretty. And I really liked the details that Louise Penny put into the town, but I just didn't like the mystery all that much. The next book was a huge surprise for me because it was a Stephen King book that I actually liked. I am not a huge Stephen King fan. I have read a few of his books at this point. I've read It, I've read The Stand, I've read 11/22/63. Is that it? Those are the ones I've read. Of those 3, I only liked 11/22/63. I didn't like The Stand. I thought it was very overhyped. I had so many people telling me that I was going to love that book. It was fine. I think I gave it a 3 out of 5, maybe a 2.5 out of 5. It was fine. I hated It. Didn't like that one at all. And then 11/22/63 I actually did like. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. But anyway, The Institute, I actually really liked The Institute, and maybe I'm starting to realize that I am just more of a fan of Stephen King's newer stuff as opposed to his older stuff. I'll give you a better idea of that in October because I actually plan on reading another of his books in October. So I'll talk about that on my TBR. But yeah, this one was good. I was very surprised. I read it very quickly too, and it's like, I want to say 500 pages, maybe a little less than 500, but it was good. You follow the story of a boy who's been kidnapped, and he doesn't know if his parents have been killed or not, and he's brought to this very secret place called the Institute where they're trying to discover the telekinetic and, what was the other one? TK was telekinetic. My brain stopped working. The one where you can read minds was the other one. So all of these kids are there to, because they've all got these abilities, and the Institute is trying to harness them, but we don't really know for what purpose. And then kids are starting to go missing from the Institute. They're taken to a place called Back Half, and then once they go to Back Half, you never see them again. And there's this story of this boy who is very smart. He has incredible intelligence, and that's not actually why he's there. He's there because he's got telekinetic abilities. But what I guess the people didn't really factor in is that this kid could outthink them. And it's just very good. I really liked it. And I'm surprised because it's a book about kids written by Stephen King, and I thought I was going to hate it because I typically don't like books that are like a scary situation for kids, but I think the reason I liked it so much is it reminded me a lot of Danganronpa, which is one of my favorite video game series. It's a completely different plot, but the setting, well, no, even the plot is somewhat similar, but the setting is very similar. And I think maybe that's why I liked it so much, because I really liked the Danganronpa video game series and the anime. I watched that as well. So maybe that's what I liked so much about it. But either way, I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I really liked it. So if you're not a huge Stephen King fan, but you want to give him a shot, I recommend trying his newer stuff. You might like that more than his older stuff. At least that's how it's been working out for me. Next up is probably one of my favorite books that I read in September, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So far, Taylor Jenkins Reid has had a great track record with me. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I want to say last year, and it made me cry so much. I loved that book. And I'm not normally a huge fan of romance, but I do like historical fiction, which is what it was. And it was so good. And Daisy Jones and the Six was exactly the same. I loved this series. Taylor Jenkins Reid just has this ability to make characters that are completely fictional feel like real people. And that's how it was in this book as well. With Evelyn Hugo, I was actually starting to get convinced that she was a real Hollywood starlet back in the 60s. 50s, 60s? I don't remember. And then it was the same with Daisy Jones and the Six. I really was starting to feel like they were an actual rock band from the 70s. You could just feel everything that they were feeling. They felt like completely real people. They were all very well done characters. And the story was just incredible. This one was a solid 5 out of 5 stars for me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was so good. Next up is Proven Guilty by Jim Butcher. This is the 8th or 9th, I can never remember which one it is, the 8th or 9th book in the Dresden Files series, which I've been reading for a couple of years now. And honestly, this series just keeps getting better and better. It started off a little not so great, but now that we're up to this area of the book, or of the series, it's so good. I loved the ending of this one. I really liked where the characters are going. I was also really happy that the previous book kind of made it sound like 2 characters were going to be in a romance, and I was really worried that was going to be the case. I talked about this a little bit in my previous vlog, but it turned out that they were not in a romance, and that made me really happy because I thought that they were better as friends. And the ending, again, was really good. I can't talk too much about this one because it's so far into the series, but just know that if you've tried the Dresden Files and you weren't really a huge fan of the first couple of books, keep going. It really gets a lot better. I would say book 4 is really where things start to get much better. So you know, if you struggled with the first few, try and give it another shot. I know Harry can be very annoying, but it's worth it. The series is so good, and I really, really love it. And finally, this was another book that I really liked. It was highly rated by me. It was probably one of the highest rated of the month, aside from Daisy Jones and the Six and Proven Guilty. And that is The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. I actually listened to this one on audiobook. I really love the narrator for this series. She does a fantastic job narrating everybody. And this was a really good finale to this series. It's a trilogy. It was very well done. There was even a twist at the end that I didn't see coming that, again, this wasn't a mystery or a thriller or anything. It just had a really good twist that I thought really added to the story. And it just, oh my God, I was in tears by the end because I didn't want it to end. I love that trilogy. I love Nari. I love Ali. I love Dara. They're all so good. And I have a feeling that I think there's another trilogy coming out, and I feel like it's gonna still be in the same world. I could be completely wrong, but it feels like that's what we're kind of leading up to. But again, since this is the finale of a trilogy, I can't talk too much about it. But basically, the whole theme of the trilogy is that you're following the story of Nari, who is a thief and like a swindler who lives in Cairo. And one day she stumbles upon a Deva warrior named Dara, and he takes her to this magical city called Davabad. And a whole lot of stuff starts to happen. She meets Ali, she meets Muntadir, which is Ali's brother. And so much stuff happens. There's a king that's very much like a tyrant who's ruling Davabad with an iron fist. And just the whole story was it was so good. And Nari kind of gets thrown into this whole political thing, but it turns out that she's actually part of it. The politics of the series was very good. The magic system was very good. It's based off of, I believe, Egyptian and Middle Eastern mythology. So I always find that kind of stuff very fascinating as well. And yeah, I really recommend that series a lot. I highly recommend it. It's so good. It was another solid 5 stars for me. And if you can get the audiobooks because the narrator does a fantastic job of narrating it. So yeah, that wraps up my September wrap up. Like I said, I read a lot more books than I usually do, but I was in such a mood to read this month. It was between the mysteries and the good fantasy novels that I was reading. I was just really happy to be back into reading. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Let me know what you read in the month of September as well. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram. You can join my Discord. You can follow me on Goodreads. You can become a Fan House subscriber, which is an optional $3 a month by clicking the link either in the little top tab thing or in the description box below. Or you can become a channel member, which is another optional $1.99 or $4.99 a month by clicking the join button down below. As always, monetary support is completely optional. You do not have to do it. It just helps me out a little bit, and I really appreciate it. So yeah, hopefully you all have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye!